Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Education Matters with Jim O'Connell. Um, Very happy to have you join us. The phone number here, area code 603-640-3091. If you're watching live, then you're watching on Tuesday afternoon at 6 p.m. Today is February the 13th. And this show is repeated again at numerous times during the week on Channel 23, and it's also available on YouTube or on IPM Nation, where you can look at it at your leisure. So. Exciting times in Manchester today. We had a school board meeting last night that at which the Dr. Bolgan Vargas, our superintendent, presented a redistricting, or I would call it a restructuring plan for our schools, which we'll be getting into in a second. But before we do that, today is Mardi Gras, so there are people out there celebrating Fat Tuesday, I'm sure. Tomorrow is quite the dilemma for someone like me because it's Ash Wednesday and it's also St. Valentine's Day. So I wish my beautiful wife a wonderful Valentine's Day, and so tomorrow, though being Ash Wednesday as well, we're going to be, I'm not sure how we'll celebrate. Perhaps we'll have to wait until Thursday because those of us in the Catholic tradition, Ash Wednesday, is a day of fast and abstinence, and you'll see us go around with our ashes on her foreheads if we attend or when we attend church tomorrow. And any of you who are around, there is a service on tomorrow morning in the cathedral at 7 a.m. Then there's 12:10 in the middle of the day, and then again at 6 p.m. tomorrow night, and I'm sure in all your local churches as well. But whether you're religious or not, I think the idea, whether it's Rosh Hashanah or Ramadan or whatever, in the other faith traditions, or no faith tradition at all, I think the idea of for Christians it's Lent, but the idea of having some time of introspection and self-reflection is probably a good thing. And especially in today's society, when we're lost with a lot in social media and electronics, and the world goes by at a very, very fast pace, we are surrounded by and sometimes blinded by information, or at least data. There are lots of data coming at us. Information implies that it actually informs us somehow. Sometimes I think it's like a blizzard. It's like trying to drink from a hose, right? So I think that finding time for reflection, whatever your faith tradition is, finding time for reflection and introspection is a good thing. To stop and take stock of where you are. And this is the opportunity to do that. And as Catholics, we have 40 days, for Lent, where we do this in preparation for Easter. But I just think that for anybody, it's good to have a moment in time when you push the world out for a little bit and do some thinking about what it is you need to improve, or where you failed, or where you might do better. And that's, I think we spend a lot of time talking to our children, and certainly in education we're doing this all the time, trying to encourage our young people to be more mindful and thoughtful, and to improve their thinking, and to grow their ability to extract information and knowledge from all this data that surrounds them. And yet we ourselves are often too busy running around between making dinners and driving kids to school, and worrying about how to, put food on the table, and where our next dollar is coming from, or all the other things we might have to worry about, that we don't always get the opportunity for self-reflection. And I think it's an important thing. I was talking to somebody, a public representative, last week, and he said to me, something to the effect, and I don't think he was being unkind, sort of saying you think you know it all. It wasn't that, but he said, there are things you know that you don't know, and I think he was saying that to me as sort of to tell me, that like as if that would be news to me, and it's not, right? I mean, I am very aware of the fact that at any given time, just as far as education in the city of Manchester is concerned, or education in the state and education nationally, that that all I have often is a view like the iceberg, the 1/5 that's above the water, and that's not being self-effacing or overly modest or anything, but I've learned that as I have proceeded on this journey, advocating for great public schools in our society and in Manchester in particular. I learn something new every month, maybe every week, maybe every day, but certainly every month. I mean, many times a year. I learn things, and those of you who know me well or who have listened to me for some time, not just on the nuance and on the edge, but I have moved my position and changed my thoughts in a number of areas. So when stuff is presented to me, I don't reject it out of hand if it doesn't fit into some preconceived model. In the end, I'm always ready to listen and ready to learn, and that's why I welcome phone calls, and I always try to be courteous to people who call in, because everybody, you never know where you're going to get your next gem from, where you're going to learn something. You have that moment of denouement. So with that said, I want to get on to this thing from last night. So, as most of you will know, the whole issue of redistricting has been quite the saga in the Manchester School District over the last. Well, it hasn't been done for, I think, 17 years is what I remember being the most recent, but a long, long time. And Dr. Brennan, who was our superintendent 2 superintendents ago, God rest him now, he tried to. He was tasked by the board very strongly with go out and come back with a redistricting plan, and he did, and he was about changing the boundaries. Most of it was so that we could, if a school was overcrowded here and less crowded there, that we move kids from one, move the lines and therefore fix that. And he met some resistance to that, and so sort of folded his tent, and that didn't happen. And then we had a subcommittee in the last Gatzis administration, the last 2-year cycle. A subcommittee on redistricting was set up under Leslie Want, school board member Leslie Want. And a great deal of time and energy and effort was put into that, and in the end, nothing came of it. I was not a big fan of that particular process. I know that people meant well and were, but I use the analogy, and I don't want to prolong it here, but I use the analogy of the way in which they proceeded, which was to reach out to the community to ask for ideas, which I think is a great idea. Let's do some of that, but that shouldn't be the only source of. So let's come up with a plan by asking people who have no idea how many schools we have, how many kids are in them, exactly how education works. You're going to ask these people for a set of plans about how to move forward. I just didn't think it was. Not that I'm saying it should be excluded, but I think it was the best method. And I use the analogy, the comparison of saying it's a bit like the water department trying to decide, how to distribute water around the city most efficaciously, most effectively, and most economically. And sort of having people show up with plans about, we should run a 12-inch pipe here, and I think we should run the pipe down Bridge Street, and somebody else says, well, I think we should run it down Congress Street, and I said this to some of the people who presented plans, sort of like, thank you for doing that, but where do I could have put forward 5 plans. They would have been 5 lousy plans, but I could have put them forward. So I was looking for something more science-based, more fact-based, more reality-based, and And so along comes, so just to finish with that, I don't mean to in any, I'm not casting stones or sliding people involved in the process under my friend Leslie Want. That's not the purpose here. I just I didn't think that it was a purposeful way of moving forward. So Dr. Vargas was tasked with he's been here a year. He was here a year in October, so a year and a half now, a little under a year and a half, and he was tasked with taking this thing on. And last year, pretty quickly, he came back with a new sort of student flow, rationalized the student flow so that the movement of children in their educational career in Manchester from elementary school to middle school to high school was rationalized. So it just made it, instead of, say Hillside accepting kids from 5 different elementary schools, they ended up with 3 or something, and sort of there was predictability. And also, to use Dr. Vargas' word, cohorts, kids moved into cohorts they were in, so that they came with the group of friends or with the people, friends or not, that they had been with. They moved from one period of schooling to the next and to the other. And the issue around what I call vertical integration, that is the connection between kids and parents' experience at elementary school into middle school and then into high school, that there's a break that happens at each of those 2 steps, and there's a lack of continuity and a lack of connection. That little Mary or little Johnny, who spends 5 years in an elementary school with a principal and administrators and a set of teachers who by the end of that 4 or 5 year period knows that kid and some of his nuances and his likes and dislikes and etc., and just who he is as a student and something about his family and something about his condition, that a lot of that is lost in the transfer from middle school to from one school level to the other. I like some of what we're going to talk about here because I think it's going to help with some of those things. Before I turn to the presentation, which, by the way, is available on the school, it's up on the school district website, which is www.man for Manchester, mansd.org. If you go there, you'll find the presentation, and I have to say that it's about 16 slides, I think, altogether in a PowerPoint presentation. I was disappointed with the first response of the board to it last night. I have to admit, I had to do other things, so I couldn't watch the full response of the board. But the initial response of some of the school board members, I can't characterize it writ large because I didn't watch all of it, but some of them were going back into sort of, I'd like to talk about, for instance, some line that was drawn on page 2, or, a quote that you made in page 7, and it was a little nitpicky to me. The big picture is what was important. What Dr. Vargas is proposing is a significant change to schools in Manchester. It's setting the city up, in my view, for future success. I don't have all the numbers, and not every line of this has been checked. I'm more interested in the initial view that for the first time I saw a set of recommendations, a statement of condition and a set of recommendations that made sense, that were borne out by some facts, and that this was a platform that could move the Manchester School District forward. And after many years of listening to and scratching my head about some of the thoughts here, as an early stage thing, I'm happy to give my endorsement of this in terms of it being a real change and not playing around the edges. Whether all of it is sound, and it turns out to be sound in the end, I don't know all that yet. But it certainly is a real effort. So as you go down through these, just looking at these, this slide here, it's called the Draft Redistricting Opportunities and Recommendations. I think redistricting is sort of the wrong description of this, but you'll see that it's there's a discussion period with the community is going to happen between February 21st and April of 2018. So here's the update here, and this slide here shows where we began. When the redistricting process started back in September of 2017. The ones in blue are the elementary schools, with the four green are the 4 middle schools, and then the 3 high schools are represented by the salmon colour on the bottom, West, Central and Memorial. MST is not on there because it's a little below that screen there. So MST is not on there because students from any one of these middle schools, Parkside, Hillside, Southside or McLaughlin, are do and can go to MST from those middle schools. So that's where that was. So the feeder, the next slide shows us it says the reasons we revised the feeder plan, and it improved this continuity from one school to the other, and it created stronger supports for students, etc. And then to make the succession of neighbourhood schools more predictable for families, so that they'd know when you move into a neighbourhood which school you'd be going to up through the end of high school, and to give children the opportunity to establish and maintain strong peer relationships. So the first phase here, this is what the school district, this slide here is what the school district actually implemented for this year, school year 2017-18. And in this graph is where we've rationalised it. You'll see to the left that the schools on the west side, Park of Arney, Northwest and Goslar Park, go to Parkside Middle School and then on to West. Then you have the 4 middle schools going to Hillside, you have 3 going to McLaughlin, and then you have 5 going to Southside. So that's the rationalisation from the earlier page right here. We've gone from that model to this model. So now the redistricting process, phase 1, did not achieve all of the desired goals. It achieved actually very few, but it did rationalise it. There's work still to be done to free up space in Manchester's elementary schools, because our elementary schools are where the largest crowding issues are. And it's important here to differentiate between, when we talk about crowding issues, the issue in Manchester is not one, generally at least, is not just one of space. It is because of the fact that we eliminated teachers out of our schools, and so the classes were much larger than they should be. We took a first step in this current year, in the most recent budget, to alleviate that problem, especially at middle schools. And so we've brought the numbers to at least to a reasonable number where we don't have classes of 30 and above. Or if we do, we have very few. And so that was the result of the most recent budget. We still ended up with, our elementary schools are still much too full, and they also have other programs going on there, etc., that causes them to be pretty packed. And then that's the simple view. And then on the high school side, generally speaking, we have an overcapacity in terms of buildings and space, and because of the decline in students that has happened with but from 3 major drivers. One, it was the elimination or the withdrawal of Bedford some years ago now. Then the withdrawal of Candia and Hooksett over and Auburn over the last 3 or 4 years, and you'll see some of those numbers reflected in a minute. And then lastly, with the growth of charter schools and private schools in the city of Manchester and surrounding towns, and with the growth of homeschooling, those have all had an effect. So we go back here, we look at this next graph right here is the enrolment changes for the city of Manchester over time. And you'll see, starting on the left-hand side, it's 15,992 students was the 2008-9 year. And that was those were the Bedford left over a period of a few years, and that demonstrates the beginning of the departure of Bedford. And then as you proceed over the lines, you get to the current year of 13,887. With a prediction for this year being at 13,630. Now, it's important to note what's written in red in the middle of this is that in addition to our school building enrolment, we provide services with special education and transportation for 714 charter and parochial school students. So there's another 700 students that receive special ed, transportation, and other services from our school district, meaning that in the total number of students that the school district is directly responsible for is somewhere around the 14.3, 14.4 number. So going to the next slide, there was a phase 2 facility studies which was undertaken by CMK Architects under guidelines set by the board. To determine the maximum capacity of each building, the capacity of each building based on current use, and the superintendent's recommendations and program utilization. Here are the results of that study of utilization, and this is the, see if I can fit that in the screen. So these are the high schools, and the colouring basically shows the level of occupation. So Central is at 66% of capacity. Memorial is at 75% of capacity. And as you can see, West High School is at 50%, but it will be at 75% once the district offices move. So the district offices which currently exist at on McGregor Street, that condo is going to be handed back to the city and presumably sold. And district offices are going to go into the West High School and be accommodated there. That's another part of the changes that have been made under Dr. Vargas, and that will have important effects in the long term because it will reduce the cost of the amount of real estate that's being managed by the city, the amount of cleaning and maintenance and heating and all the other things associated with it, and the capital costs associated with it over time of acquiring that building in the first place. And I've heard some naysayers talk about we may not be able to redeem the full value of the building, etc., and I find that hard to believe in the current office environment in Manchester, and especially in the Mills area where there's huge demand for office space. So I think that the elimination of the district offices and moving over to West, I would expect that the school district, and actually as it turns out, when the school district stops using the building, it will revert to the city, and it's the city that will actually accrue whatever benefit there is to be had from it. But in the end, we're a city of one, as our former mayor used to say, or did say for a while. So I expect there will certainly be savings in the long term. The shorter term savings are a little more questionable because there's a cost for fitting out West High School to accommodate this change over here. So and now the next slide just shows that all 14 of our elementary schools are near 100% capacity. They're actually maybe at 110 in some cases. The elementary schools are pretty maxed out. Now, it's important when you look at the elementary schools, it's important first of all to know that none of this is simple, that we could spend a long time talking about any one of these things because it's not just as simple as our elementary schools are all at 100% and say no more. Our elementary schools, some of them have got specialised programs in them for kids with autism or on the autism spectrum, with other special needs kids, with we have kindergarten programs. There are multiple things going on within these buildings, but the big picture is high schools do plenty of capacity, and in the elementary schools with less capacity. So This slide here tells about the repurposing opportunities to free space at the elementary schools. These are the opportunities. So high school space, West Memorial Central could absorb 8th grade if you wanted to bring 8th grade up in there. The middle schools could accommodate grades 5 through 7, freeing space at the elementary schools. The middle schools could accommodate 5 through 8. The elementary schools could create a model for grades K through 4. Those are the opportunities. That's not the proposal yet. And then repurposing opportunities to free space at the elementary schools based on preliminary findings from the study. So Memorial High School could accommodate a preschool centre to serve students with developmental disabilities required by federal law with a cost of approximately $1.8 to $2.2 million. And then without building a preschool centre, elementary art, music or health on a cart, that's going from room to room on a cart, could free up 14 classrooms in the class. This is going through some of the things that were considered. And so none of this is the actual proposal yet. So moving MST to West, for instance, was a consideration. It would cost $20 to $24 million. McLaughlin Middle School could accommodate all the Beach Street 5th graders, and there's a problem around 5th graders there in that the kids from Beach Street were for after school programs had to have special transport and all this stuff. So there's a lot of stuff behind all of these. So, and then south side or McLaughlin could accommodate Wilson 5th graders. So the superintendent's draft redistricting opportunities and recommendations. So here's his recommendations. The first one in blue and deserves to be highlighted is to establish a grades 5 through 8 middle school model. As he says here, the model works in Goffstown already and in other surrounding towns. Increase student access to learning inside and beyond the classroom. So provide all students with the opportunity to earn 1 to 4 high school credits by the end of 8th grade in math, science, foreign language and computer coding. Position the middle schools to offer learning opportunities to all students similar to those available in surrounding districts such as Londonderry, Bedford and Goffstown. And the superintendent was careful to point out that he was saying the position of middle schools to offer learning opportunities similar to those available in surrounding towns, not the same as, because we haven't gotten there yet. We're talking about similar so that we can remove some of the glaring examples of difference. And then opportunities could include access to online courses and VLAX. So the big thing, establish a grades 5 through 8 middle school model, so taking the 5th graders out of elementary school and putting them into middle school. And then as the second part of that is create elementary grades K through 4. So the elementary schools would now be from kindergarten to 4 years to 4th grade. Elementary grade in elementary school buildings will free up space. It achieves the Board of School Committee goal to reduce class sizes at the elementary level, advances student achievement, and makes Manchester schools more competitive with surrounding districts. Superintendent's draft redistricting opportunities recommendations. So the number 2 is to reduce class sizes. So here, what I like about Dr. Vargas's proposals is that they are based on, he's giving us some numbers that we can measure. And at the end, he actually has benchmarks in place. But so the idea is to have 20 students in kindergarten, 20 to 22 students in grade 1 to 2, 22 to 25 students in grades 3 to 5, and 25 to 27 students in grades 6 through 8. So this enables teachers to better meet students' needs, responds to community desire for smaller class sizes, designed to improve student achievement at all levels, and makes Manchester elementary class sizes similar to those in surrounding towns and districts. The third leg of this is to adjust the school feeder pattern to send Beach Street and Wilson elementary students to McLaughlin. If I could, just before doing it, if I could take a step back here a second. So the reduction in class sizes, the big change here at elementary school, the big issue is moving kids from the 5th graders out of elementary school and putting them into middle schools. The biggest fear that I hear about that in the past, and the biggest fear I hear about it in the 1 or 2 people who commented negatively about this was, is it a good idea to have 5th graders in with 7th and 8th graders? Well, I can tell you that the whole period of middle school is the period of greatest change in kids in terms of their development, etc. So their socialization and all that stuff, puberty and hormones and all those things are that all of that sort of goes through that period of middle school. Already in middle school, if you look at the sixth grade in most middle schools, the sixth grade is already on a different track. If you go to Hillside and you go to sixth grade, you'll notice that sixth grade kids are generally they're not usually in contact with seventh and eighth grade. And I see no reason why the fifth grade couldn't work exactly the same way, so that it's not usual for fifth graders to be in the presence of eighth graders. It doesn't happen at lunchtime. It doesn't happen during classes, etc. So. This is a model that I think can work. We have the capacity in the middle schools to do this, and so there will be 4 grades: 5, 6, 7, and 8 at middle school, and we would have kindergarten through 4th grade, 5 grades at the elementary school. The idea. We all know that early education is where it's at, and so we look at the numbers that Dr. Brennan is proposing around the 20 kids in kindergarten, or 20 to 22 in first and second grade, that if we actually could achieve those numbers, and he has a plan here to do this, then he's talking about adding 4 math teachers to these schools, so that our kids would have an opportunity to spend more time in smaller numbers in front of a teacher, so that there's more one-on-one time and etc., to give them the best opportunity possible to get the base knowledge set down pat, so that kids, if kids are behind by the time they get to 3rd grade, it gets more and more difficult to catch up if you haven't gotten up to speed, so to speak, by 3rd grade. So everybody I've ever spoken to in education says the same thing, that if you want to improve outcomes up through the years and up through the grades and up through the schools, that it all starts in that 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. That's where the concentration should be. And this is exactly what Dr. Vargas is proposing here. So I think that our schools with one less class in them, so that there's more classroom available, more space available, and a concentration on those early grades, will be a positive for kids and for parents and for families. I know change is hard. At any time, people get used to one given thing and they run with it. If you go to Bedford, I think in Bedford, if I remember correctly, the 4th and 5th grade, or the 5th and 6th grade, are in their own school. So there's, I think it's 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. I'd have to try and recall that again. But you come out of elementary school, and then you've got this 2-year period. The other thought in this model also is that one of the things in middle school is when kids are only there for 3 years, there's an acclimatization process and a learning, with staff knowing students and families, etc. Middle school goes by very fast with just 3 years, with the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in there. By adding the 5th grade in there, then parents have an opportunity to be fully understanding of the school. What happens today is they come in 6th grade, parents are kind of used to the procedure and how things work and what happens annually and the calendar and all that by 7th grade, and then the following year they're leaving anyway. This was always a challenge at the parent-teacher organizations, or the PTA or PTGs. Having 4 years there, it means at the very time when your kids need the most diligence from parents, and for parents to be, and families to be fully involved in their kids' lives and in the families and in the school's life, etc., parents should be fully engaged, or have the opportunity to be fully engaged, and be aware of what's going on, and gives the maximum opportunity with those 4 years in middle school. So I think that that will be a good thing. Moving quickly on through these here, to adjust the feeder pattern to Send Beach Street. So this is this next slide here, which is to adjust these schools. Let me see if we get that. Yeah, so you'll see that that now there's a slight difference here. Parker Varney, Northwest, and Goslar at Parkside. That's a nice unit right there that's on the west side of the city. 3 elementary schools going to a middle school, going to a high school, and we'll get into that some more in a minute because it's an important part of the proposal. The idea here is to take the all the kids from Wilson and Beach Street will go to McLaughlin, and the Beach Street kids won't be broken up in any way. But when they leave McLaughlin, the arrows are a little misleading here, because under the new model, Wilson and Beach Street kids will go to McLaughlin for middle school, and once they've finished McLaughlin, they would go to Central. Smith Road, Webster, and McDonough would continue to go to Hillside and into Central. So now, at Central High School, you'd have Smith Road, Webster, McDonough, Wilson, and Beach Street. At Memorial, you'll have Green Acres and Weston schools going through McLaughlin into Memorial, and you'll have Hallsville, Jewett Street, Highland Goss Falls, and Bakersville going through Southside into Memorial. So you can see that instead of having 8 elementary schools going to Memorial, you'll actually have 6 going to Memorial and 5 going to Central. This is that's a change right there that you're going to see, and it's a good thing because it's going to change this. There's a problem with Beach Street being separated between 2 different middle schools, and the kids being divided up and coming back together. And Beach Street is the school, has a number of challenges. It's the school in the city with the highest, or one of the highest, rates of free and reduced lunch, which i.e. means poverty levels. It also is a very diverse population, and it also has a very transient population. Because of the nature of the inner city in Manchester, people rent apartments, and they often move. They fluctuate and move very quickly. So the majority of kids who enter Beach Street in first grade are not there by the end of 5th grade. The vast majority of them have moved to some other school, and in and out. It's not all just kids coming in. It's very dynamic. So moving on here, the personalized learning opportunities. This screen right here is talking about what's happening on the west side of the city. So the proposal here is to take the current example of Parker Varney. Parker Varney uses multi-grade level personalized active learning approach to elementary school. So kids aren't just in one grade, but there are kids from multiple grades working together on different things. So the idea is to expand that to Goslar Park and to Northwest, and to integrate those schools so they're operating similarly. Bring them down into the middle school at Parkside, and from there to Manchester High School West. And there's a model here that's being developed that will be very dynamic and exciting for the city, but starting here with this group of schools on the west side of the city, so that and with the energy and the partnerships and the money being spent here through the Bar Foundation, and in cooperation with people like Catholic Medical Centre and others, the idea is to make these West Side schools an example of where change has been successful and there's more dynamic learning going on. The superintendent goes on to talk about personalized learning opportunities. So he's talking about replicating the Parker Varney model on the west side. Replicate a successful model within our district, enhance the current strengths of Northwest Goslar Park, Parkside and West with the Parker Varney approach. So that's expanding what Amy Allen has been doing, who's now the assistant superintendent, but was the principal at Parker Varney. increased collaboration between teachers, principals, families and the community across the entire west side with the 3 elementary schools, the middle school and the high school. Better coordination of resources to address the needs of our students, increase family involvement to encourage participation in education and decision making for the success of students, and to earn a high level of satisfaction from families. I think it's very important that that's right there. So a next big piece is to create a preschool centre at Memorial High School. So the idea is to take a piece of Memorial High School, build a separate entrance, spend some money to do it. I think the numbers come up in a minute. It's somewhere around 1.5 million, I believe. But the idea is that the preschools, as it says here, the preschool centre will serve our youngest students with developmental needs in 2 locations instead of 6, with its own entrance and parking and a new playground, and the Bishop O'Neill Centre would remain open. It'll provide better focus on meeting the needs of preschool students. Time for shared therapy services would be used more efficiently. It streamlines transportation, improves the utilisation of space at Memorial, and allows for more free space at elementary schools, because the kids from these programmes would come out of Highland Goffs Falls, Jewett Street, Parker Varney, Smith Road and Weston, and freeing up room there. But the whole idea of having kids with developmental needs and their physical therapy and the other therapeutic services and special services that they have would be in one place, as opposed to have people driving back and forth across the city or sharing assets between one school and another, having them all in one place in a designated there was a thought at one point about building a building for this purpose, designated for this purpose. But it was a step too far for the city of Manchester, given our budget constraints. So this seems like a wonderful and innovative idea that I think most people can get behind, and it should show real savings to the city over time. Then the 6th item is to repurpose the surplus space at the high school level. So at West High School, significant effort is underway to move the central office to vacate from their vacant space to West High School. So that's underway right now. That process is beginning, or is underway. Transform West High School to attract more students through innovative public-private partnerships. And there is a large 6-figure grant that has been given by the Barr Foundation. There's the STEM or STEAM program, as it's called. I'm not a big fan, but that's me. STEM has much more resonance, I think, and means something real. But that program and other programs at West, and I think with Dr. Vargas sitting there as the superintendent and with the offices in part of the West High School building, I think that can, and given that and the wonderful staff that is at West High School right now, I think the stars are aligned to make West High School a wonderful, a remarkable space. And given the excitement around what's happening at Parker Varney and in through Parkside, with a wonderful principal there as well, doing remarkable things, and on into West High School, I think that that whole model can transform the city's view of West and the West Side, and there should be excitement around what's going to happen there. I have a high level of expectation that these words and aspirations can be actually turned into a reality for the people, and lessons can be learned that will be developed across the rest of the city. Memorial High School to repurpose part of the facility to accommodate early childhood program. Explore the sharing of available space at Memorial for MST general classes to accommodate potential growth in MST. The whole idea that MST and Memorial are so almost side by side. If there were, true collaboration between those two schools, just seems like a sensible thing. We're too small a city to have sort of stovepipes where a school that you can literally throw a stone from one school to the other. I mean, I don't know, in a straight line, they might be 300 yards apart. Maybe 500 yards at a stretch. I should go Google it sometime on Google Maps. But it's literally a stone's throw. And, if MST is to continue to flourish and to grow and deliver the value that it's delivering right now, um, having the ability for MST students to either, whatever way that dynamic model would work, about taking some general ed classes at Memorial, or whatever it may be, having a space at Memorial, or whatever way that works, it seems to me a more logical way of advancing the interests of all the students, than waiting for a time when the City of Manchester will have the $17 million or so required to build a cafeteria and a kitchen and a gym and everything that is required at MST. I think if an accommodation can be reached there as to how that would work, so that MST can avail of some of the value at Memorial and perhaps vice versa, that would be a good thing. And then in Central High School, explore public-private innovative partnerships, universities, local business and not-for-profits to use surplus space and to advance student achievement. So there are already exciting things happening around AP courses and advanced courses and shared credit courses, etc., at our high schools and at Central High School. I think there are businesses in the City of Manchester, and potentially new businesses in the City of Manchester, who we might end up finding them actually having space within Central High School, and some quid pro quo happening where students are able to avail themselves of some of the state-of-the-art knowledge that's available from that business, etc. So you can imagine if there were a business tomorrow that existed right next to the GE plant in Hooksett, for instance, if they were on the same space, that whether it's engineering or computer science or whatever the area of that business might be, where there could be shared talents, etc., and opportunities for apprenticeships and internships and all that stuff. We're on the right path here, I think, if we can actually get support for this and make this happen. And then very quick, the budget preliminaries, and these are just early estimates for the budget. And in Manchester, sadly, it often comes back to this one spot where we. Oh, let me just see here. Sorry, this seems to be central to everything, but. The draft plan calls for a phased-in approach, preferably in two phases. Phase 1 will be the West Side network of innovative schools, including the K-4 elementary and 5 to 8 middle school by September 2018. So that would be by September of this year, you would have Goslar Park, Parker Varney, and Northwest K-4, with the fifth grades coming out and starting their time in Parkside. And while that is happening, that the work goes on at West High School, and within 6 months from now, we have the first steps of this new dynamic and exciting opportunity on the West Side. The estimated budget needs for Phase 1 would be staffing to reduce class size and strengthen student achievements for K through 8. So that's 17 full-time equivalents. So 17 teachers are needed to staff that. Transportation, there will be a transportation cost of $41,000. Curriculum improvement and math textbooks adoption for the 5 through 8 classes at Parkside, $89,000. Professional development will be cost neutral because of grants and current sources. Innovative family engagement program will be grant funded. Then math textbooks and resources adoption for students and teachers from grades 6 through 8 at McLaughlin, Hillside and Southside, $100,000. And then 4 full-time equivalent math teachers aimed at achieving the goals, $200,000. And if you add those up, you're somewhere around 1.2 or something like that. The budget estimates, preliminary estimates for facilities here, 8 to 10 rooms changed to 5th grade in team locations. The cost per move, $26 per hour, with only 1 hour per room to move them, so it's not an awful lot of cost. The cost for transportation of furniture materials, it's $30 per hour. He estimates that it's 1 hour per room. So the total cost for Parkside room moves is around $1,550. There are members of the public businesses who would donate that amount. Then room modifications and technology will be cost neutral. So the total cost of Phase 1 is $1.5 million. Given the amount of change that this represents, that's a very reasonable number. Um, and then going forward from there, the draft plans call for a phased-in approach, preferably in two phases. In phase two, we'll be improving student achievements in K through 4 elementary schools and strengthening the middle school for Hillside, Southside, and McLaughlin to be implemented by September 2020. Now, Dr. Vargas talked about he'd love to be able to bring this into 2019, but we'll aim for 2020. He thinks that people will be excited by the changes that they're seeing and envisioning, and that they'll be ready to support an earlier move, and we might get it by 2019. The estimates for preschool centre at Memorial, that's the creation of a new centre at Memorial, so it'll be boxed off with a separate entrance for preschoolers to be dropped off and picked up, etc. Would be $1.6 to $2.2 million, and the full estimated budget needs for phase two will be decided by April of this year. Redistricting measures of achievement by 2025, and this is the last slide, folks. And this is as important as any other slide, because this is saying that we go to 2025, this is what this will deliver. 80% of students in K through 8 will be proficient in reading and math. 60% of middle school students will complete Algebra 1 for high school credit. Improve the 4-year high school graduation rate from the current 76% to 90%, surpassing that of both the state and the national achievement levels. 95% of students will earn a certificate of employability and citizenship prepared for college, career, military, or employment. And 95% of families in Manchester will be satisfied with the educational experience we provide their children as measured by Family Satisfaction Survey. So that's what he's aiming at in 6 years or so. So that's a quick synopsis of this plan. It would be easy to pick apart any plan and sort of find things. What I want to take the 10,000-foot view and look at it and say, this plan has the attraction of and potential to transform education for every single school and every single student in the district. And Dr. Vargas, true to his word, back months ago when he spoke about this, he said that we shouldn't be redistricting without measuring it against one measure, which is that we're going to justify the change by saying that we're going to improve education for every student in the district. So just changing in response to declining populations, or for some, utilitarian need, like, we have to get rid of a prefab here, or if we move 2 streets over there. And he's gone completely away from that idea. He's saying, here's a plan that sets us up for longevity and for expected growth, and for the expected flat, numbers over in the short term, but that we have now set ourselves up with a student array and building array that allows us to do the things that we want to do. So I have to tell you, we could go down any one of the rabbit holes people want to go down. In the end, whatever is decided, I hope is decided quickly, after due diligence. I hope people get away from there. None of us are getting everything we like. I don't expect that to happen. I think this is a good plan. I think it should be given a good shout by the people of Manchester, and I have to congratulate Dr. Vargas on coming up with a plan that's a real plan, that's doable, manageable, and that has the potential to deliver the value that the people of Manchester deserve. In the end, we want the best schools that our kids can have and deserve, and so again, I'm looking forward to that. Tomorrow's Ash Wednesday, folks. I'm going to go home and eat something in advance of my day of fasting tomorrow. I hope you have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you all again next week. Thank you for your time, and have a great week. Bye-bye.